All right, next up in our jam-packed agenda here is Tim DePriest. Tim works out of our EDC office in Buffalo. He has got a Bachelor's of Science in Forest Biology from SUNY ESF and a Master's of Science in Natural Resources from Cornell. He actually started his career as an ecologist with DEC in the Stream and Wetland Regulatory Program in Region 7. So another great mixed reason represented. For the past 5 years, he's been working on the Niagara River to implement habitat improvement projects under the New York Power Authority licensing agreement for the Niagara Power Project.
Can everyone hear me without the microphone? Or
Do I need the microphone?
microphone? Okay. All right, I'll give it a shot. Okay, well, as my title describes here, I'm going to be speaking about some habitat improvement projects in the Niagara River, where we've been doing some work on the shoreline starting in Region 9 about 25 years ago. So we've got a history of addressing shoreline erosion issues, more from a habitat enhancement or improvement standpoint. So I'm going to share with you my observations on these various projects and what, as an ecologist, what I see as working and beneficial to the whole system. But it's pretty much going to be a slideshow with lots of photos, so hopefully you enjoy that. Let's see here. So, as my title mentions, we're talking about high energy river systems, so Niagara River, and what are some of those energies. So, the approach, there's a lot of energy there. We've taken, I'd say, the main approach to dealing with this energy through using offshore berms, these low profile berms I saw in the previous presentation referred to as sills sometimes. I call them low-profile berms. But anyhow, we're dealing with the wind, waves, ice, boat wakes, which are a major source of energy in the Niagara River. These require a certain amount of engineering with these offshore berms. I think it's unrealistic to try to deal with a highly impacted shoreline just through grading and planting vegetation. You need to have some physical structure there. So I think that our biologists back in the early 80s that started really working on these projects that resulted from mostly environmental remediation sites along the river, lots of industrial sites and landfills and things like that that needed to be cleaned up, and then included removing sediments from the shoreline of the river, leaving an exposed shoreline. So these guys kind of looked around and said, right, this is a coastal system for the most part. Where are some other coastal areas in the country where there's been an approach to doing a nature-based shoreline? And Chesapeake Bay is one of those areas where I think this has been going on for a little while longer. So they looked at kind of those offshore berm approaches, and we started using them. So in more recent history, we're extending these same technologies to habitat improvement and restoration sites. So these energy sources are many-fold here. We've got waves. This is, when I talk about the Niagara River, I include the Buffalo Harbor in that as part of the whole system. It's the head of the river there, so this is just taken from a few days ago when it was a combined SAISH event. Lake SAISH came up about 4 or 5 feet with some 60-mile-an-hour winds. You get a lot of energy coming off of that. We've got huge ice jams that form in the river. This is from a couple of years ago during the polar vortex event. We've got a lot of ice rubbing up against the shoreline there. The boater issue. Here's an example of what a typical summer day looks like on the Niagara River. And these boats are in close proximity to some of our most valuable wetland and near-shore habitats. And then we just get big icebergs coming down the river once in a while in the middle of winter as well. This slide also illustrates the abundant waterfowl that come to the Niagara every winter, which makes it important that global habitat perspective. So, before I get into some of the solutions, I'm going to share with you some areas of the river. The Niagara River is really pretty much two rivers. There's the Tonawanda Channel that's highly developed, highly industrialized, hardened shorelines pretty much along the entire lane. And then there's the Chippewa Channel, or the West Channel, that is the border of Canada. It's pretty much the exact opposite. Very little development, hardly any hardened shorelines. And we've got ecological services of natural emergent wetland habitats, shoreline vegetation that's still intact, providing the erosion control and the habitat features that we value in the river. And so we use these sites as actual reference reaches to model what we want to see and reproduce on that other half of the river that we're trying to restore. So we've got nice stands of bulrush that are highly resilient to wave action. They'll actually, after the summer's over, these stems will stay in place all through the winter. This is really tough plant material. And then on shore are warm season grasses like prairie cordgrass and blue joint grass that do really well in holding soil together, very deep root systems. You can see the substrate here is gravelly, very coarse substrate. So all these kind of features combine to make a highly resilient shoreline on its own. Here's another view of that kind of same type of system. These offshore wetland habitats are phenomenal at dissipating wave energy. So this is what we want to see in other areas. Here's a final view of what this looks like just from a couple of weeks ago. It kind of looks like what reminds me of the St. Lawrence River, kind of. But this is what a lot of the Niagara used to look like before it was industrialized. So as I look at these different sites over the years, I'm noticing the different features that are kind of particular to each different project. We start with the material. What is the berm made from? It can range from river stone rounded. I've seen berms made out of rounded bank run type material to quarried limestone, large diameter quarried limestone, and those contribute to the function of that offshore berm. The height of the berm is really key, especially in the Niagara River, where we've got power generation that constantly is rising and lowering the water level. So knowing how high you want that berm to be, how much do you want it to be overtopped? Perhaps you want it to be submerged, so you get a lot of circulation. Depends on your specific site. The materials the berm is made of also enable or predict whether or not you can have vegetation growing on it, or it's just going to be a barren rock type of berm, and deciding what you want your plant community to be like. How much shade do you want on your shoreline? Those are all considerations for berm material. And then another aspect is more along the linear length of the berm. Do you want to have breaks in it to allow water circulation from the river into this near shore area? Or do you want to really protect it and keep it a really low energy type of system? So there have been all different renditions of berms with these kind of different variables thrown in. I'm going to show you some of those. Here's one of the original sites on the river that was a remediation site here. This is all just a landfill. And so there was extensive shoreline work that basically resulted in a denuded shore of just exposed, non-native soil material, pretty much fill and whatever they used to remediate the site. So this is where our biologists, fisheries biologists back then, first started asking for an alternative to the standard riprap armoring approach to the shore. They said, let's do these offshore type berms that we've seen in other places around the country. So here you've got about a half mile of shoreline with about 5 different these berm structures built off the shore. You can see there the river's flowing from the bottom of the stream to the north. So these are enclosed on the upstream end to kind of reduce the amount of flow through these berms. This is what it looks like on the ground here. Now, this is from a very low water day. This was from a couple days ago. All of a sudden along the water is pretty much over top of this berm here. And so what we have is a lot of wave action coming in over top, but it's enough protected. You can even see on this very hot day how classy this is on the inside to allow the emergence of a plant. On the inside, this gets kind of deep in here. It's 3 or 4 feet deep during normal water conditions. So this is where we see a lot of our submerged aquatic vegetation plant communities. If it was a little shallower, we probably have some deeper emergent plants. But it grades up to a nice shoreline with native emergent wetland plant species in the near shore, and then some warm season grasses that we bring up. Here's another area at the south end of Grand Island where I would describe this as like a moderate elevation type of offshore berm. Not too high, not too low. Waves rarely will overtop this, but it has lots of openings across, and this one's not very long compared to the last one, but we allow for a lot of flow through on here. At this location, there's a lot of river current passing by here, so we get a lot of flow back in through here, which lends to a different type of habitat. We've got more submerged aquatic plants in here with some shallow emergence on the shoreline. And the material itself is of medium coarseness, so probably not going to see a lot of plant communities forming out of this berm. Whereas with this one here, this was actually the first site down on the river at once again another landfill. The offshore berm here was constructed out of bank run material, so it was like rounded glacial deposits with some angular material mixed into the core of the structure. What this has allowed is for extensive plant growth and trees and shrubs on the actual berm itself, which in turn creates some shading effect on the nearshore area. This is what it looks like in between the berm here and the shoreline here. We've got a nice variety of plant communities from submerged aquatics up into emergence. This particular area is pretty productive for reptiles and amphibians. It's a really low energy, quiet water type area that was created, so not a lot of flow through here, pretty slow water. So it has those particular aspects as a habitat. Here's a nice view of a nice robust Alston area inside that berm here. And once again, you can see the extensive vegetation growth on the outside of that. This berm is fairly high profile. I've never seen it underwater. So it's able to stay above water all the time. And I would have guessed with that kind of material, the rounded river stone, you'd see this lasting too long, but it's been about 25 years, and it doesn't look like much has moved on it, so it's pretty solid. Okay, so getting out of kind of the early projects where we're restoring impacted shorelines from remediation sites, we're moving into the era where we're trying to use these approaches to restoring habitat in different sites of the river. This is Motor Island, okay? This is a project that was done with New York Power Authority relicensing initiative to essentially go around 3/4 of this island and pull out its historic bulkhead and restore natural gradients and habitats in the near shoreline area. So I'm just going to focus on this point in particular. At one point, you can see part of the wall remaining there. That extended along the entire length, and the contractors went in and removed that and scaled out these shallow water embayments in the island. So once again, the upstream end is at the bottom of the screen here. This water is flowing this way. This is what it looked like before the project started. It was a concrete bulkhead resting on top of actually a really old timber and stone bulkhead. And we took that out and replaced it with kind of what we would call a combination of nearshore design here. We've got the offshore berm. This is during really low water. You'll notice that on all these slides, there's different water levels constantly observed here in the river. So we can go from fully exposed riverbed to just being under 2 feet of water. So, but here it is at low water, offshore berm. We even integrated some large woody structure into the shoreline here. Think about what the Niagara River once was. It was a huge repository for all the logs and wood flowing out of Lake Erie. And I think those contribute to shoreline stability over time. So let's put that back in its place. And then on the actual shore, we've got the standard coconut fiber material. Now, the whole point of this is to stabilize this long enough to allow the plants to take over, planting them with woody shrubs and some herbaceous species, some trees. So this core material here is here long enough to protect from erosion until the trees can take over. I mean, we can probably say the same thing about these berms. They're not going to be here forever. And when you see those big ice flows coming down, those are like bulldozers. And this is all temporary, really, if you think about it over time scales. But what we really want to do is, in the near term, stabilize it well enough to allow the natural system to take over those trees and other plants to stabilize, and those offshore wetlands as well. Here's another view of the same project from the downstream end of the island here. This is where we are seeing some really rapid erosion rates happening here. This area was not protected by that bulkhead, and there was, especially on this side, this is the navigation channel over here. This is where everything from your lake freighters to your yachts and power boats, hydroplanes, everything is coming through here. So NYPA constructed this offshore berm. You can see at this particular point in time, it's submerged for the most part, except for right there. So this is about 600 feet long when it wraps around and protecting the whole downstream end of the island. This is what it looks like from the water level. You can see it's fairly low profile. This is a section that's just barely above water. And the planting community's already started to become established here after a couple of years. Some of these are planted, some of these are coming up on their own. But the goal is to, eventually have a robust emergent wetland planting community in this section. As we go into the future, we are getting less, moving away from all rock structures to utilizing more of the natural materials that we would find normally in a river environment like the Niagara River. So an obvious choice would be large trees, logs like this that are fairly resilient and if oriented in the right positions can provide the same protection as those constructed berms. So this is actually a shot of a project that's going in on the Buffalo River, fairly close to the mouth there where it meets the harbor. After the Buffalo River, as you probably have heard, has been cleaned up quite a bit. And now there's an ongoing effort to restore habitat in the near shore areas of the river. So the idea was to take some large logs, attach those to some rocks, and drop those in certain locations, so that in the near shore shallow water environment, to provide protection from the energies in the Buffalo River, which are pretty much the same as the Niagara: ice, boats, lake satiates, and waves. So these are being arranged in kind of like a chain pattern along the edge of the river for the same purpose of protection. Here's another use of large woody debris in the Niagara River itself on the embayment. This is a shallow water protected embayment where there was actually a couple factors that led to the decision to use the logs here. The main one was actually the fact that there's an eagle nest up in one of these trees here. We get a really narrow window of time to get in there and do some work. So this enabled us to kind of prefabricate these structures, get in, place them, and get out without disturbing the eagles too much. But I like it because it's actually giving us an opportunity to try out new things and use this natural material approach to this long-term stabilization. You can see there's some core material back in there too, along the shoreline, which will last maybe 5 or 6 years. So the goal is to now protect this from waves and then have the emergent planting community extend out into the nearshore area. another view of the same type of area here. So we're experimenting. You know, we're kind of trying new things out. You know, the name of the game is erosion protection, but it's really for in the interest of habitat enhancement. It's hard to get plants to grow when you got an eroding situation. So that's why we are primarily interested in protecting from erosion. We're also taking some novel approaches. So that site I was just pointing at is right here on the inside of this protected lagoon. This is Strawberry Island in the Niagara River. What you see here are extensive offshore burns that were put in the mid-90s as a wetland mitigation project from a different location. Also, it's part of a project to restore a breach in the island here that started to cause major erosion. So here's a mid-river site, highly exposed to all kinds of forces I was just describing, that where we've gone and put in these pretty robust burn systems. Here's the most recent example. This is just downstream from that last slide. This is at Frog Island, as we call it. This is a site that was pretty much a barren sand flat, very shallow in the middle of the river, where we wanted to see some plant communities become established. So once again, we need to first protect the area with these engineered offshore burns. For the most part, they barely come above water. You can see the light is the light areas are the areas above water. We included some planting pods or cells on top of the burn. But this is all designed to protect this inner area of wetland construction. This is all native plants, and got some logs once again in there. So we're using this idea, this concept of offshore burn to reduce energy, reduce erosion, to allow us to get a toehold to get our plants in the ground and reset the clock for ecological succession. So, this is just I wanted to share with you these projects, get some ideas going, get some conversations started. I think that there's probably areas all along the Great Lakes where these similar approaches can be used, especially in the shallow water embayments. I'm not sure how well these would work on the open exposed lake, but that's it from an ecologist perspective. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Or you can contact me at this address here, phone number at any time, and I'd be happy to talk with you. All right, so the question is, how would this work on inland lakes like Lake Chautauqua? I think that if the conditions are similar to what we see here, you've got shallow water near shore, I think they work great. I think there's definite application for inland waters. Yeah. Question right here?
Yeah, question. I like the approach of maybe sort of combining the range together with it here. One of the questions I have in these kinds of projects, you have fishery disclosure, what sort of monitoring programs do you have to see? Obviously, you can see whether or not these things are staying in place or not, but I'm thinking more about the fisheries or the ecological elements and related, so mitigate the economic performance of those things from an ecological perspective.
Okay, so there's a question about what can we document about the ecological benefits to the fisheries in these projects. And we've done some kind of poking around. We don't have a formal monitoring plan in place over the years. We operate kind of on the principle here of, we do a lot of fisheries sampling in other habitats of the river. So, for example, muskellunge are one of the premier sport fish of the river. Something receives a lot of management attention. We've taken part in research to see where these fish are spawning, where their critical nursery habitat is, and it's consistently areas with submerged aquatic vegetation, moderate flow, and certain water depths. So if we're seeing that we're creating those same types of habitats, we're kind of extending the principle that we're probably doing some good there.
If you know what you're able to.
Yeah, but we should get out. It's kind of hard to sample these areas actually, but it'd be worth doing.
In
if I could add to that real quick, I was actually talking just a couple of weeks ago to Terry Heatley, who's a habitat restoration specialist with NOAA's Great Lakes Office. And his current charge is actually, he's working on developing a monitoring framework for these Great Lakes habitat restoration projects because they recognize that there's a significant gap in quantified data following habitat restoration projects. So NOAA's actually actively working on it, and I'm not sure how far develop a framework to do it.
Great. There's lots to learn still. Question in the back?
Do you do any type of engineering analysis when you start to do these things? Because you experiment with a lot of different materials, you know, different size rocks and stuff. So does anyone take a look at it and say that's...
No, but, so the question is, do we do any engineering analysis with trying different approaches? I would like to set up kind of like an experimental type of area where we can try some different materials, different types of approaches. But the engineering that goes into a lot of these projects is pretty extensive, especially with the NIPA projects. For like those last couple of slides I showed you, that Frog Island and Miller Island work, they studied, you know, the wave action, the fetch, the ice scour potential. They had to do years of studies to really come up with these designs, and you know, so they can feel like it's going to stay in place. And, you know, it's a one-time shot. But I also think, you know, that we should be able to come back and adaptively manage as well, and you know, see what's working, see what's not, and build on what is. I'll start with the back there. Yeah.
What kind of logs do you use? Like, do you use willow to hold that little circle that shoots up?
All right, so the question is, what kind of logs? It's typically whatever we can get our hands on at the time. A lot of these logs come from, you know, development projects or agricultural, you know, fields where they're expanding the size of the field. So, but ideally, I like really hardwood. White oak is probably the best. But we've used willow. Willow rots faster, but it tends to stay green a little bit longer. It will shoot, you know, kind of will be like a living log for a few years before it finally, you know, gives up. And, but large diameter, the better, I think, obviously. But hardwood, I think, is the best way to go. Yeah. Question over here.
Tom Bridges with the Corps of Engineers. I have an impressive number of examples, I think, that you have. One question that I'm frequently asked, and I think and I've seen observed, is the sort of regulatory permitting coordination process that sometimes is involved in using these kinds of approaches. Can you comment on what that context is for you and how you address those issues, or if there are issues that you address?
Concerns, maybe. Convincing some folks that the amount of, because it's mostly, so, and I was doing regulatory work for a while, so we always, rocks are not well aligned with habitat, so, but I've come to learn it's about where you put those rocks that makes a difference, so. But the sheer volume of material, I think, probably raised the alarm of some permit reviewers would say, why are you using so much rock? You're trying to build habitat that doesn't seem to be lining up. So it took a little bit of, you know, kind of working and some education, showing what the river is doing, what these forces are, and how we need resilient material like rock placed in the right spot to reduce those energies. Like when I was working in more stream systems, we use a lot of rock to build Rosgan-type structures. The difference was, you know, we're putting them in a purposeful location to enhance habitat. And so I think it was just an extension of the same idea. Yeah, we're using a lot of rock, but we're building great habitat with it. We're not obliterating the habitat. So now there's, I think, especially in the Niagara, an acceptance and a general regard that this is a great thing that we need to keep working on. But as I say that, I would like to get away from rock. Biologically, ecologically, I don't think it's as valuable as wood for you know, supporting trophic dynamics and energy in the system. plus with rock, you also can create some habitat for invasive species, gobies, zebra mussels, things like that. So I like wood, and we're gonna try to use a lot more wood in the future. I think that's all.